Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's study. And we're going to continue looking at 2 Kings. Where we're going to go exactly, I'm not sure, but we'll talk about it. But anyway, before we do, let's have a word of prayer. The dear Father in heaven, again, we are thankful that we can be here together to study your word. And we are thankful for the things that you've been showing us this week and the way that you work in our lives. We know, Lord, that there's much to do in personal study and in ministry to others. And we are thankful for the time that we have here this morning to look at 2 Kings again. We just ask that you can guide and direct in the things that we look at and how we understand them. So may your Holy Spirit speak to each of our hearts, be with those who watch online. We pray this in Jesus' name. Okay, so I was looking over 2 Kings. Now we have from, well, I guess, we're going to have all this stuff about Elisha. So, with 1 Kings, you're going to, you have sections that deal with Elijah. And then, of course, now we have Elisha. So it's in 1 Kings, now in 2 Kings. And so what we had so far is we're going to have Ahaziah, then we have the story about Elijah being taken to heaven, and then we looked at chapter 3. Now we're going to have Joram, the son of Ahab, began to reign over Israel and Samaria in the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, and we looked at that a little bit. We're going to look at it in more detail as we go on. Now, I'm always so busy trying to, one is putting together this book, and then looking at some of these things. I still need to I need to go through Edwin Thiel's book to understand it more clearly, what his arguments are. Now, we're not going to have any chronological details until we get to chapter 9, I believe it is, when, Jehu's going to be anointed king of Israel. So right now here in chapter 3, you have Jehoram, right? And then that's basically it. You have Jehoram, the son of Ahab, right? And so let me just see. I'm just looking at this other chart. Yeah, so we're going to have this period here in which Elisha is operating. And there's a bunch of symbolism, and I'm not sure. I've been reading through it and just thinking, boy, there's a lot of stuff here. This could take us a long time to get through until we get to Jehu. And see, Jehu, from the time that Jehoram begins to reign, which is in, I'm trying to get this thing to scroll up. Yeah, so he's going to begin reigning in, 898. And you're going to have, so 898. And then, okay, that's not working. I'll do it this way. And then until you get Jehu, Jehu's going to begin reigning in 884. So there's 14 years from when Joram of Israel begins. So is that right? 12 years. 897 I have here. 890. Ahaziah. Okay, I see what I'm doing. Yeah, so there's like 12 years. So I gotta figure that out. So I'll try to get some of this stuff drawn out before we get to Jehu. But when we get to Jehu, we're going to have this sorted out correctly to make sure that we understand it. But we move to chapter 4 and 5 and 6 and 7. These are all going to be stories about Elisha. Now we know that Elisha had this double portion of the spirit that rested upon Elijah. Now, we take Elisha to represent the second angel's message, and Elijah the first, as in our history. So I guess we just need to start reading these stories of Elisha. We're going to come back to this again, right? Remember, we're just doing our first pass through this. But it says, now there cried a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets unto Elisha, saying, thy servant my husband is dead, and thou knowest that thy servant did fear the Lord, and the creditors come to take unto him my 2 sons to be bondmen. And Elisha said unto her, What shall I do for thee? Tell me what thou hast in the house. And she said, Thine handmaid hath not anything in the house, save a pot of oil. Then he said, Go, borrow thee vessels abroad of all thy neighbors, even empty vessels, and borrow not a few. And when thou art come in, thou shalt shut the door upon thee and upon thy sons, and shall pour out into all those vessels, and shall set aside that which is full. So she went from him, and shut the door upon her and upon her sons, who brought the vessels to her, and she poured out. And it came to pass, when the vessels were full, that she said unto her son, Bring me yet a vessel. And he said unto her, There's not a vessel more. And the oil stayed. Then she came and told the man of God, and he said, Go sell the oil, and pay thy debt, and live thou and thy children of the rest. And it fell on a day that Elisha, okay, so before we get to the Shunammite woman. So when we look at this story, what are we looking for? What is it that we see? We got oil. We know oil represents the Holy Spirit. We know that oil is in the parable of the 10 virgins. In the parable of the 10 virgins, you have some that have oil in their vessels, some that don't. So we got vessels, we got oil. Now here we have a widow, right? So she was a wife of one of the sons of the prophets. Her husband died. Now she's a widow. And she has 2 sons. And she's in debt, and the creditors, want to take the sons and have them to be servants. Now, of course, she's going to act on faith. She's going to do what Elisha suggests of her. She doesn't say, well, that's kind of crazy. How can I, fill up a pot of oil, a bunch of pots of oil with oil if I only have 1 pot of oil? But she does it.
Could the 2 sons represent the 2 25-20s for the north and the south?
Yeah, it could represent
that the church wanted to either discard or somehow control the people that were giving this message.
Yeah, so why she
credited, so to speak?
Yeah, okay, it could be. Why is she a widow?
Because she doesn't belong to the corporate church, or she doesn't follow their dictates.
Okay, could be. So we have Elisha, he's representing, we say, the second angel's message. Now, of course, we can make an application to, because you're doing a broader application when you're sort of zoomed out a bit. You're looking at Elisha as representing.
This is the Holy Spirit talking to people that are, well, he's speaking to everybody, but only a few receive it. And once you start receiving the Holy Spirit, then automatically you're separate from the main body of people.
Yeah. But yeah, so we could have one that applies to the church. We could have it apply to the movement as well.
And empty vessels, well, I don't consider that a lack. I consider those are people that realize what they have isn't sufficient, and they're looking for greater light. They're looking for a reformation of character. They're realizing God is still speaking.
Yeah. No. So and I look at this as a giving of a message. Now, back when Jeff was around, and there was the message 2014. No more public evangelism, right? Because we're not at the point where we can do public evangelism. Now we know that we're moving into a time when a message has to be given.
The no public evangelism, that's what came to me when it said, shut the door upon me. I consider that's not only a close of probation for the corporate church that didn't receive what Lewis F. Weir and others had said, but also, we're to be privately learning here. We are schools of the prophets.
Right. So we have, and I think we've been doing that. So basically we're studying to understand the message, and that message is being poured out, right? That is, we're receiving all of this light. But at some point that light has to be given to others, right? I mean,
we know that
changes. Yeah. Now, and it's something I've been praying about, for years. I mean, ever since I started studying this message, how is this message to be given? And, if we look at this woman as being a widow, in this, that is, she's separated from her husband in the sense that her husband's dead. But when I look at the situation, I was thinking about it the other day, just my situation with the church. On Sunday, I went to my out for dinner with my nephew, well, with my sister's family. But my nephew Jared had his birthday, and he'd got back from Vietnam. I mentioned it yesterday, and every time I think about my family and those that go to Warburg Church, and I think about the situation with the church. So, I mean, I've never really been a conference guy, but even my local church, it's not the most welcome place. It's not like if I went there every Sabbath, I'd probably be fine. It's just we have studies here on Sabbath, and I might have a bit more influence there. But really, I've had my influence. My influence sort of continues through, my family, not just my sister, but my son Micah and his wife and their kids. But I think about our relationship with the church. All of us have had, some relationship with the church. Some of us are still fairly active. Some are not. There's some of us have lots of friends that we talk to in the church. Not all of us are, we're all different, in what our relationship is with the church and with the church members. But we do feel that in some ways we're like this widow, right? So it doesn't feel like we're fully apart. At least I can say that for myself. I can't speak for everyone, but like we're fully a part of what's happening in Adventism. And of course I am, friends in Facebook with some people who are pastors, and I see, they have the pictures of the church and the social activities. And there's, my friend Daryl, he's retired now, but he still kind of works almost like a pastor, and he's always inviting people on Facebook and taking pictures of the church and all these happy faces, happy Adventist faces. Yet there is a problem, right? We know that there's something missing. I even think about my conversations with Lauren, and so with him, just thinking about the church and where we are and what our place is, and you understand what I'm talking about. That it's not a simple situation. And
well, I think whenever I think of the church, I think your house is left unto you desolate.
Yeah,
and other pronouncements of doom. I don't even consider them SDA. They're SDA only in name.
Well, see, I don't know about. It depends on the person, right? So
well,
I don't.
Yes, I'm talking about in general.
But yeah, I don't know. Probably you're correct. But all I'm saying is, we have to give a message somehow, right? And there are people who want to know the truth.
Thank God for them.
Yeah, and when I think about the church, I never really think about the organization so much. To me, Adventism has always just been the people I know. But, my relationship with many of the people in the church that I used to be close friends with is not that great. And, they're not.
Same here.
Yeah, they're not open to listen about the things I'm studying, right? Some of my family is, but, just the people I know in the church, I've shared some things occasionally with people, when I've gone to church, or potluck or something. But that's few and far between. And our pastor that we have in Warburg, he's moving on, so they're going to get a new pastor. That's always a bit scary, but you can see the point that there is, right now, I'm writing that book. I'm dealing with the story of Noah and his family in the ark, working through the chronology, but also just the sense of them waiting. They do a lot of waiting in the ark. And I understand waiting for people. It's something that I've spent most of my life doing, is waiting for people. But, they're waiting in the ark, they have a work to do in the ark. They are doing a preparation to get out of the ark when they, on the first day of the 10th month, they're going to, see the tops of the mountains. And then, because the water has been receding. And then 40 days later, they're going to let out the raven. And then 7 days after that, they let out the dove, comes back. Then they let it out again. A week later, it's going to come back with an olive branch. And then they let it out again, and it doesn't come back. And then they still have to wait for 8 weeks in the ark before they can get out of the ark. So there's doing a lot of waiting. But I do think they are preparing. So when God opens the door and lets them out of the ark, they've done a lot of preparation with the animals and other things to go out onto the land. So I think about this, where we're in right now is a time of waiting, but it is a time of preparation. So we are doing things like studying. We do these online studies. We put them online. There is a handful of people who watch them on a regular basis. How many? It's hard to know, because, when you see a video has 90 views, well, it doesn't necessarily mean 90 people. It could be a lot more, but also not everybody watches every video. So some people go and watch, one video here and video there, which I understand you can easily do and follow what we're doing. You don't have to watch every single video, because we do go over things again and again. But anyway, I have the academia, and then we all have our different influences, people that we know and that we talk to. But still, our influence is very small. And of course, we aren't the only people God's using. God's using all kinds of people all over the world in various ways. But we do think that, what we're doing is important. It seems to be directed by God. And no matter how small it is, we recognize that if God is directing it, that it is of importance and can't be neglected. So we have this work to do. And so when I look at this story of Elisha and the widow's oil, it seems to be illustrating our situation at the present time. So how much we can get out of this, I'm not particularly certain. What things we can take away from this in looking through this story. There isn't a bunch of numbers in it. It doesn't tell us how many vessels. That'd be really helpful. So, they're going to sell it, sell the oil. They have a debt that's going to be paid off. So I don't know. I don't. I see the obvious symbols: the oil, the vessels, the widow, the two sons. But I don't see what more I can do with it. I don't see if there's something that I need to see. I don't see what that would be.
That promise in Job comes to me. Though thy beginning were small, yet thy latter end shall greatly increase.
Yeah. No. Yeah. So and that's why I never really worry about a small work. I mean, I believe in doing little things. Now they're going to, of course, there is a shut door. Right now, they're shutting this door on themselves. So when they go in, they're going to shut this door upon. And you said, well, it's the time in which we're not doing public evangelism. We're sort of shut in, just like Noah is in the ark, right? So that's the other parallel here with the story of the ark, is the shut door. So he's going to say, shut your door. When she went from him, so she went from him and shut the door upon her and upon her sons, who brought the vessels to her, and she poured out. So they're going to get all of these vessels. They're going to borrow them, and she's going to continue asking them for vessels. I believe they have all their vessels there. In the story, when I read it in Arthur's Bible storybooks, it's like they keep going out and getting more and more vessels, but it's not what it says here. Maybe Ellen White adds to it. In spirit of prophecy, I don't know, but it just seems here they get these vessels, they're shut in. She says, bring another vessel. He says, that's the, we already filled up the last one. And then she's going to tell the man of God, and he's going to say, sell the oil, pay thy debt. So I guess what we can say about what we're doing is we know that we're doing the right thing, and that the message is going to prosper. but maybe there's more that we should see from this story. Anything else that people can see? Okay, I can go on to the next story. Okay, so then we're going to have Elisha and the Shunammite woman, and it fell on a day that Elisha passed to Shunem, where was a great woman, and she constrained him to eat bread. So it was that as oft as he passed by, he turned in thither to eat bread. And she said unto her husband, Behold, now I perceive that this is an holy man of God, which passeth by us continually. And of course, we get that word continually. It's Tamid, 8548. Let us make a little chamber, and I pray thee, and on the wall, let us make I pray thee on the wall. So to make a chamber upon the wall, so it's just an addition, right? And let us set for him there a bed and a table and a stool and a candlestick. And it shall be when he cometh to us that he shall turn in thither. And it fell on a day that he came thither, and he turned into the chamber and lay there. And she said to Gehazi his servant, Call this Shunammite. And he said to Gehazi his servant, Call this Shunammite. And when he had called her, she stood before him. And he said unto him, Say now unto her, Behold, thou hast been careful for us with all this care. What is to be done for thee? Wouldest thou be spoken for? To the king or to the captain of the host? And she answered, I dwell among mine own people. And he said, What then is to be done? What then is to be done for her? And Gehazi answered, Verily, she hath no child, and her husband is old. And he said, Call her. And when he had called her, she stood in the door. And he said, About this season, according to the time of life, thou shalt embrace a son. And she said, Nay, my lord, thou man of God, do not lie unto thine handmaid. And the woman conceived and bare a son at that season, that Elisha had said unto her, according to the time of life. And when the child was grown, it fell on a day that he went out to his father to the reapers. And he said unto his father, My head, my head. Now, of course, that's a doubling, and it is the number 7218, which we know is all the digits of July 18, 2020. It's the word Rosh, right? And he said unto the lad, Carry him to his mother. And when he had taken him and brought him to his mother, he sat on her knees till noon, and then died. Okay, and she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, and shut the door upon him, and went out. And she called unto her husband, and said, Send me, I pray thee, one of the young men and one of the asses, that I may run to the man of God, and come again. And he said, Wherefore wilt thou go to him today? It is neither new moon nor Sabbath. And she said, It shall be well. So he doesn't really know why she's going to see the man of God. Then she saddled an ass, and said to her servant, Drive, and go forward. Slack not thy riding for me, except I bid thee. So she went, and came unto the man of God to Mount Carmel. And it came to pass, when the man of God saw her afar off, that he said to Gehazi his servant, Behold, yonder is that Shunammite. Run now, I pray thee, to meet her, and say unto her, Is it well with thee? Is it well with thy husband? Is it well with the child? And she answered, It is well. And when she came to the man of God to the hill, she caught him by the feet, but Gehazi came near to thrust her away. And the man of God said, Let her alone, for her soul is vexed within her, and the Lord hath hid it from me, and hath not told me. Then she said, Did I desire a son of my Lord? Did I not say, Do not deceive me? Then he said to Gehazi, Gird thy loins, and take my staff in thine hand, and go thy way. If thou meet any man, salute him not, and if any salute thee, answer him not again, and lay my staff upon the face of the child. And the mother of the child said, As the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. And he arose and followed her. And Gehazi passed on before them, and laid the staff upon the face of the child, but there was neither voice nor hearing. Wherefore he went in again to meet him, and told him, saying, The child is not awakened. He went again to meet him. And when Elisha was come into the house, behold, the child was dead, and laid upon his bed. He went in, therefore, and shut the door upon them twain, and prayed unto the Lord. And he went up and lay upon the child, and put his mouth upon his mouth, and his eyes upon his eyes, and his hands upon his hands. And he stretched himself upon the child, and the flesh of the child waxed warm. Then he returned and walked in the house to and fro, and went and stretched himself upon the child, and the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. And he called Gehazi and said, Call this Shunammite. So he called her, and when she was come in unto him, he said, Take up thy son. And she went in and fell at his feet, and bowed herself to the ground, and took up her son, and went out. Okay, so we got this story and the other story, just dealing with the Shunammite. So the Shunammite first, we're going to have this woman who builds an addition onto her place, a room, a chamber, so that Elisha can stay there when he's traveling. And then he wants to do something for her. Gehazi says, she doesn't have a son, doesn't have a child. And so the Lord gives her a child, right? And then we're going to see later when the child is grown. So this is obviously some years later. I don't know how old the child would be, but he went out to his father to the reapers. So he's going to go in the field when they're reaping, and he's going to get sunstroke, I assume. I'm not sure if it's sunstroke or what's the other word? There's 2 different ones.
Heat stroke.
Heat stroke, yeah.
Well, not heat stroke. Fun.
Yeah, but there's one that's more severe and one that's less severe. I can't remember how it goes. But anyway, so and if we're a child, the child can overheat quite easily. Their bodies tend to be able to overheat in the sun. They can absorb a lot more heat than we can, because we're larger. But anyway, so he's going to die, and then she's going to not tell her husband why she wants to go see Elisha, man of God. He's going to ride, find him, and then he's going to say to Gehazi, go put the staff. Then he's going to go see the child. He's going to lay on him to warm his body, and then he's going to pray, and then he's going to do it again, and then the child's going to sneeze 7 times. Right. So again, we also have a shut door. Right. So they shut the door upon them twain, and prayed unto the Lord. So, I'm wondering if these stories are parallels, that is, that they're repeating the same history.
Well, it's similar to the story of Zarephath, when Elijah was with the widow of Zarephath.
Yeah. No, so we have some similarities, though we see the double portion of the Spirit on Elisha, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So notice it's verse 19, where the child is struck. So I'm thinking 4:19, my head, the beginning of that timeline there when we first started getting into these.
Yeah.
In 1844.
Yeah.
I don't know, but could you that story? Could it be like Christ's death and resurrection with the boy?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay.
I mean, it is. Elisha is more representing Christ. So the woman's son that she has. Now this is a different woman. Of course, it's not the widow, right? This is just her husband's wife.
But in verse 27, she caught him by the feet. So she catches the prophet by the feet. She bowed down and grabbed it. And it's just like, that's what happened when Christ rose and he appeared to his disciples. They prostrated themselves and grabbed his feet. I mean, if you can read that in Matthew.
Yeah. So, I mean, Elisha represents Christ. So the child wouldn't represent Christ in his resurrection, but it could represent, a message or God's people in some way.
A life-giving message, as in Ezekiel 37.
Yeah. Now, of course, we have this woman is given this child, and then the child dies. So there's a disappointment there as well. And then, of course, she seeks Elisha, Now she's going to be, she's going to ride a camel, right? Or what is she going to ride? No, an ass. An ass. She's going to ride an ass. So we do have a symbol there which we would attach to Israel, or it's Israel, it's Islam.
The Muslim.
Right? Yeah, Muslim. So she's going to saddle an ass, and then she's going to go to the man of God to Mount Carmel, right? So she's going to go to Mount Carmel. Now, when Gehazi comes to her and asks, "Is it well?" She says, "Is it what?" She says, "It is well," when it isn't really well. Not sure why she says that. I think she just wants to tell Elisha. I don't know if there's any symbolism in that. When she says, "Did I desire a son of my Lord? Did I not say, do not deceive me?" So, we could definitely look at this as the July 18, 2020 disappointment. Now we also have Gehazi. Now, Gehazi, he turns out not to be the best, right? Which we're going to see in later stories. So I think he would be an apprentice of Elisha's. Would that be correct? Would we understand that as his role?
Well, he was a servant.
He's a servant, but is he like a candidate to be like his successor, sort of like Elijah and Elisha? Is that what Gehazi is thinking?
I wonder, because the guy was so covetous.
Yeah, I know. So, I'm thinking it does represent a part of the movement, right? Or the movement in some way, in the connection with July 18th.
So an opportunist.
Yeah. Now, the woman, of course, she's the one who has the child. Now, we also have noon there. So he sat on her knees till noon.
Yeah.
And then he died. So we got that symbol. Noon is like midnight. Yeah, I'm reading through this. It's like, there's so much here, but I'm not sure how to sort through it.
So she propped him up until he died.
Well, she sat with him, until he died.
He was on her knees.
Yeah. And then she's going to lay him on the bed of the man of God and shut the door upon him. Right? And then go out. And then she talks to her husband, right? I need one of the young men, one of the asses, that I may run to the man of God and come again. And then, of course, his question, wherefore wilt thou go to him today? It is neither new moon nor Sabbath. And, of course, we would think about that in the context of, chronology, right? We have the weekly cycle and the monthly cycle mentioned there. See, I just don't feel like I have, sometimes when we go through these stories, I sort of have a key that I can go through the story and unlock it, and there's kind of a logic to it. And usually it's some kind of chronological key that helps us place this on a line. Here I see lots of symbols, but I don't see what the structure would be.
So the husband, is reminding her of the strict rules of Judaism, right? It's not a new moon or a Sabbath. It's like you have to abide by these certain rules of protocol.
Well, I don't look at it that way.
I do.
I know. But I'd say he's just questioning why, because she doesn't tell him, our son is dead.
Yeah, I know.
She just says, I need to go see the man of God. And he's.
But she probably would have called everybody together, and they would have been sitting Shiva or something like that. They would have been preparing him for burial.
Could have been, yeah, and
yeah, you have some parallels with Abraham.
Okay, what do you see?
Yeah.
So first of all, Abraham leaves with Isaac and doesn't tell Sarah.
Okay.
So even though Isaac's life a little bit different, and then when Sarah, when she has a son or is told about a son, she's going to be a present. She's going to be so Jesus says to Abraham or Abram or Isaac, to Sarah, about this year time next year you'll have a son.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have that sort of scenario there as well. And then just with Elisha and Elijah, that Elisha said to Elijah, I will not leave thee. You know, Abraham. Elijah says, go, I'm going to go. But Elisha says, no, I'm going to stay with you. So you have that sort of scenario with the woman when she gets to Elisha. There's sort of like a very similar language there. She sends, or Elijah sends Gehazi, and then she's kind of saying, no, as surely as God liveth, I will not leave thee, whatever. It's very similar to what Elisha said to Elijah.
Yeah. So we have some of these literary sort of connections of how they put together this story, some parallels in language, though not necessarily the same situations, right? But some parallels there. Okay, so that's useful. That's just sometimes I have like a key that unlocks the whole story. But
she persisted. She was rewarded because of her faith, which was shown in her persistence of remaining by the prophet. She recognized him as somebody who could, return life into her dead son.
Yeah.
The importunate widow, so to speak.
Yeah. So Gehazi is going to go to the child, put the staff upon the face of the child. The child doesn't speak or respond, right? There's no voice nor hearing. So then he goes back to see Elisha and says the child is not awake. And Elisha came into the house, and behold, the child was dead and laid upon his bed. So now I'm not sure in putting the staff on the child if the idea was that staff would restore the child. I kind of have a feeling that's what is suggested there. And so Gehazi puts the staff upon the face of the child, and the child doesn't respond, right? So that's why he's going back to Elisha to tell him that. So Elisha is going to have to go in the room. He shuts the door upon them, the two of them, right, and prayed unto the Lord. And so then he's going to lie upon the child. Now, him putting his mouth to his mouth, his eyes upon his eyes, his hands upon his hands. So they're going to mention three different things: the mouth, the eyes, the hands. Is there any significance in that? I mean, you got seeing, speaking, doing, right? But is there anything more?
Well, you have to see what God has in store for you with your spiritual eyes before you can speak it and live by it.
Mm-hmm. But this is like a parallel line too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So this is line upon line. So then he returned, right? So after the child was, he lied upon him the first time, warmed the child, he returned and walked in the house to and fro. Now, to and fro in
studying.
Yeah, well, yeah, it can mean that. Here in Hebrew, just literally, it's one. That's had, right? 259, and then hena, that is hither and thither. So one way, and then another.
That's what it says in my Bible too.
Yeah, so that would be how he would translate one way and then the other. He walked one way and the other, or to and fro, but just one way and then one way, or one here, one there, hither one way, thither the other way. But in Hebrew, again, there's no difference between hither and thither like in English. It's just the same word. So then he's going to stretch himself upon the child again. So we can say the to and fro, we can be studying.
That's a chronology also. It's a circuit.
Yeah, it could be the chronology. So this time he stretches him out upon the child again. And also it says he returned, right? So then he returned, and that word turned again is shuv, right? Now always note that word. To me, it's one of those words that you need to always recognize, because it's a significant word in what it symbolizes. It's just used many different places, many different connections with chronology and with Bible prophecy. And then he walked, so he returned, then he walked into the house, to and fro, one direction, then another, and went up and stretched himself upon the child, and the child sneezed. Now, for the word sneeze, there's two different words, right? Zarar, so that means perhaps to diffuse, and ad, which is just a preposition, adverb, or conjunction here. So I guess sneezed out. I don't know what word you would put in there. In English, we would just say he sneezed 7 times. In Hebrew, they're going to have another ad in between that. Maybe it's until 7 times. Now, of course, the 7 times here, we have, in studying the 7 times in Leviticus 26, people will bring up, there's one in Proverbs, one in Psalms, if a man falls 7 times. And what's the other one? The other one is, what's the other 7 times? And, we of course have the 7 times later too, dealing with, what's the guy's name? Who's going to wash the leper? Who's going to wash?
Yeah, Naaman.
Naaman, yeah. So Naaman. But I never see people mention this 7 times, right? Which I find odd, right? Why this one's always just ignored. Now, in this case, we have pa'am, which we know. This literally the stroke, like a beat, a regular beat. And it has the numbers of Capricorn's constant in it, right? So, if we take those numbers 7, 6, and order them 7, 6, 4, 1, and subtract 1, 4, 6, 7, we get 6, 7, 1, 4, right? That's how it works. So 7, 6, 4, 1 minus 1, 4, 6, 7. You get 6, 1, 7, 4. I think that's what I said. Did I say? And that's what I meant to say if I didn't say that. 6, 1, 7, 4. Right. So we can see this has those digits, 6, 4, 7, 1. So it's just one step to get to Capricorn's constant with that number. But the 7 times, that's going to be the normal word, just 7, right? Sheba. Okay. So people will use that. They use those other ones as an adverb to argue in Leviticus 26 that the 7 times is just an adverb of intensity.
Oh yeah.
Right. And definitely there's intensity involved in it, but it doesn't take away the numerical significance and prophetic significance of the symbol of 7 times, right? But here we have it again. So he's going to sneeze 7 times. So we can relate it to the symbol of that message, but it also has the Capricorn's constant. So we got two words together there that both are significant in how we understand them symbolically. And the child opened his eyes, right? So he's going to sneeze 7 times and he opens his eyes. So in opening his eyes, the child is seeing, right? It's not just, it is that he's awake, but he can see. And they're just going to have the word ayin for eyes, right? Opened is pakak. Okay, so that's a common one.
Yeah, this reminds me of Habakkuk 2, because the vision, in a sense, was put to sleep, died, was restrained, tarried.
Yeah, tarried, yeah.
Yeah. So don't despair when your vision seems to tarry or your prophecy seems to fail.
Yeah, and of course, we know that God expects us to wait. I know there's a lot of people who sort of question, why would God, with the Adventist question, how come we have the disappointment? Was that, so there's different ways people approach it. They just see it was a mistake. Others see it as that God was teaching us something, that it was the proper time for that prophecy to be proclaimed. even though we didn't fully understand it. And we can do the same thing with July 18, 2020. So we know as Seventh-day Adventists, just because there was a failed prediction, we have to look at the context in which that prediction was given. Definitely, we know July 18th was not something manufactured by man, right? There was nobody, who's trying to get attention by, creating some prediction with the July 18th. I mean, maybe people in the movement might have had that attitude, but definitely that's not how it came about. It came about from a study of the scriptures, and it came in a context where time setting was brought into the movement, right? So I never brought time setting into the movement. I didn't seek to time set. It just happened, right? And it happened because it was brought in by Parminder and Tess. So we can understand that. Now, other people may not, right? People can look at it as we're making excuses and so forth. But I think we quite well understand the purpose of that failed prediction. Now we have the 7 times here. Now the 7 times, of course, is not July 18, 2020, but we know that the understanding of July 18 comes from an understanding of the 2520 Millerite history, the prophetic mirror, all these prophetic periods. So it is a continuation of that. So the fact that it's mentioned here that the child sneezed 7 times. And, okay, now take up thy son. She went and fell on her feet, bowed herself to the ground, took up her son and went out. Okay. So we got a general idea of that story. We're going to probably have to go over these stories again and see how they're all connected. Now, we have the deadly stew. I don't know. For some reason, this story always reminds me of Bachelor cooking, but especially my son Matt cooking.
Deadly potlucks.
Yeah. So anyway, it always just, this story brings memories. Of course, reading, Bible stories to the kids. This is one of those stories the kids liked. But Elisha came again to Gilgal. So now we have Gilgal in the story, right? So Gilgal brings us to 9/11 is how we understand it, right? As a symbol. And there was dearth in the land, and the sons of the prophets were sitting before him, and he said unto his servants, set the great pot and seethe pottage of the sons of the prophets, for the sons of the prophets, right? Now, of course, we have the English word, pottage, which can mean different things. But here in the Hebrew, something boiled, that is soup, right? Or pottage for the sons of the prophets. So they're going to make a meal for them. Now there's dearth in the land, so we don't know the whole circumstances there. In this story, they don't tell us much about it. But they're going to, obviously not have as much resources, I would assume, is why they mention it. And one went out into the field to gather herbs and found a wild vine and gathered thereof wild gourds, his lapful, and came and shred them into the pot of pottage, for they knew them not. Now, not quite sure, for they knew them not. Not really sure how I would translate that.
They didn't know any better. They had no discernment.
Yeah, so I just wouldn't have put the them there.
Well,
maybe they mean they did not know what the gourds were. Maybe it's just a bit awkward in English, right? But they knew them not, them being the gourds. So they did not, they weren't familiar with the plant is the idea. But I think I would have said that they knew not. I don't know if I'd put them in there. I've translated some other way, but I can't think of how I would do it. So they poured out for men to eat, and it came to pass and when it says they knew them not, the thing is they is the people who are going to eat the pottage, right? Going to eat this stew or soup. They're not going to be aware that this had happened. The way that I think about it is, they made this stew, and this person is going to come and just put something in the stew, and people aren't even aware that it's happened. That's how I've understood the story. But So if we look at the word wild gourds, so we got wild sedeh, which means to spread out. So it's like a field in the country of the land. And then gourds, 6498. Pakua, the wild cucumber, splitting open its shed to shed its seeds. So I'm not really familiar with what this plant would be, why it would be poisonous. Okay, but so they poured for the men to eat, and it came to pass as they were eating the pottage that they cried out and said, O thou man of God, there is death in the pot, and they could not eat thereof. So somebody noticed maybe the certain flavor, that it wasn't good. I'm not sure. They didn't wait till somebody died to find out if it was bad. So it's hard to know exactly the details of what's happening there. But he's going to ask for some meal. Now, the meal, of course, is a kamak, which is just flour, right? And he cast it into the pot. And he said, pour for the people that they may eat. And there was no harm in the pot. Now, do they know for certain that it's poisoned?
Well, when you're doubled up in pain and you got terrible abdominal cramps, yeah, probably.
But I think they just taste it and they know that there's poison in it by the taste. I don't think they get sick. But I've always wondered about this story. Let's see here. In this story, the poisoned pottage made edible. Okay, so let's go there. I'm just going to read Ellen White's account. This is in, I don't want to look at it in this version. Here it is. It was on the occasion of one of his visits to the schools established at Gilgal that he healed the poisoned pottage. There was a dearth in the land, etc. Right? So she's just going to quote the passage. At Gilgal, okay. So that's all she does. So she doesn't even add any details. So she's just going to quote it. Okay, so that's not too helpful. It's just going to be the same. So yeah, so she doesn't really say anything. She doesn't elaborate on it. She just gives us the story from the Bible. She does say it's poisoned, right? So it's been poisoned in some way. So she doesn't say what throwing the meal in does. So putting this flour in the pot. So I don't know. I'm not sure what to do with that story other than the sort of obvious things on the surface. But we could say that something has been poisoned. But I'm trying to figure out how does soup or stew have anything to do with like a message?
A mix of things taken from the churches, from the world, from our own ideas, accepted.
Yeah, well, definitely something's been added to it that shouldn't have been. I mean, we don't know what this, the pottage was. It could have been just, beans or something, right?
Message of Tess and Parminder.
Yeah. So something came into the message. Now then he's going to take meal and throw it into the pot to get rid of the poison. So, so we can say that Christ has somehow cleared up the poison that's been brought in by Parminder and Tess. Possibly that's the basic way that I could see it, that the message has been corrupted and it's going to be purified. Of course, flour is grain that's been ground, so it has to do with study, I would think. But then also he's going to say, pour out for the people. And here they're going to have the word am, right? People, right? So pour out for the people. Now, of course, that could just mean the students there, right? That they may eat, and there was no harm in the pot, right? So it's been purified by whatever he did, shredding. That's this guy shred in this gourd, and he's going to then throw in this meal that's going to counteract that poison. Not sure how it does that. It could just be a symbolic act. Okay, and then we have this next story. There came a man from Baal Shalisha. So we got Lord. Shalisha would be, it's 1190 is the number. Is that significant that we got this word Balasha, which is 1190? So the 4480 is just the word mim, which means from, right? And if we look at the Hebrew here, yeah, so you're going to have, what's interesting. Yeah. So when you look at the word itself, so the mem, again, here in the Hebrew, and we've seen this many times with mem, they put it in the King James interlinear with with the Hebrew numbers. I guess not interlinear, but with the Hebrew numbers, right? So they put the King James, they have the Hebrew numbers there. And when a mem, the letter M, is added to the beginning of the word, from right to left, you can see there's this word Baal, that's Baal, right? That Ein and Lamed, so Baal, and then Shalisha, right? Now, what does this word itself mean? Shalisha or Shalash. Do you remember what this word is?
Something to do with 3?
Yeah, so the number 3, right? So let's just confirm that, so the first is this word is 11:9. Yeah. So thrice great Lord, right, is Bala Shalisha. So it's 3 times great, I guess is the way that they're translating that. But yeah, it comes from the word 8031. Shalisha means trebled. So we had looked at that before. So trebled. And then Baal is 1168. But here it's 1190 when you in Strong's dictionary. So we got that 11:9 or 9:11 symbolism in this story. Okay? So I think that's pretty interesting. So trebled Lord. Oops, I don't want this. I ended up looking at the Septuagint there. Okay. So a man came from Baal Shalisha, however you would say that, and brought the man of God bread of the first fruits, 20 loaves of barley, and full ears of corn in the husk thereof. And he said, give unto the people that they may eat. So I guess this is still part of the same story. There's a dearth in the land, and then we have this man from the Lord that's trebled, or the great 3 times great Lord, right? That's going to bring these bread of the first fruits. So what does that remind us of?
Well, we're supposed to be first fruits unto Christ is first fruits unto God, and we also, as it's coming.
Okay.
1 Corinthians 15.
Yeah, okay. Now I'm thinking more in line with the study that we did on the first fruits. So we know from the study that we did on the wave offering, right, which is going to be connected with first fruits, that we're going to have the period in which the manna is gathered, right, from the 16th day of the first month in 1533 BC from the second month. Yeah, so 16th day of the second month, and then to the 16th day of the first month in 1493, right? So, and that's going to be on the day of first fruits. So we have bread of the first fruits. So we can look at it. They cross the Jordan River. They're going to have their first fruits. Okay. And then I know from the day I was converted, August 11th, 1980, there's the same number of days to July 18, 2020. And then we also have the 20 loaves. So 20 loaves of barley. Okay. And anything there? We got the barley.
Barley is in the spring, right?
Yeah, that's the spring harvest. That's why it's first fruits, right? It's in the spring. So they just had the Feast of First Fruits, is what I'm understanding, and that's the barley harvest. But you do have the wheat as well later on, and then you have the loaves of bread that are baked with wheat. But here, these are loaves that are baked with barley. So that would be the first first one in the spring, Gora, or Seora. So this is from the sense of roughness. This is barley. Okay. Okay. So we got this bread that he brings. Now, full ears of corn. So that's just one word. So they translate it as full ears of corn. But the word there, 3759, means lots of different things. Carmel, plantation, garden land, orchard, fruit, garden growth. So I'm not sure how they get corn out of that, but maybe because it's in the husk. So that could be cyclone. Anyway, so full fruit. Okay, I see how they're doing this. So that word, it means a sack or a bag. Yeah, so I'm not sure if it's ears of corn in the husk. Now, of course, corn can just be grain, but I think what they mean is there's just a sack of grain. That's what it says literally.
It reminds me of Mark 4:28. For the earth bringeth forth fruit of herself, first the blade, then the ear, after that the full corn in the ear.
Yeah, it's just it doesn't say anything about ears here. It just says a sack of grain. So they have a full sack of grain is how it should be understood, but not ears of corn in the husk. I'm not sure why they translate it that way. And he says, give unto the people that they may eat. So again, we have, obviously they're not eating the grain, they're eating the bread, but they have this grain as well. Now his servitor, 8334. So servitor, primitive root, to attend as a menial or worshiper. Okay. What should I set this before 100 men? He said again, give the people that they may eat, for thus saith the Lord, they shall eat and shall leave thereof. So I guess there's a lot more than just, I don't know how many people there are. Like, are they all just the prophets, or there's other people here? So how can I feed 100 men with this, I guess is the question.
It's just like the Gospels, where
Yeah.
Christ was, how can we feed so many people, such a great multitude? And he just multiplied the food.
Yeah, now the critics of the scriptures who believe that the Bible is just, myth or legend or fairy tale or whatever they want to disparage it, they'll just say, the stories about Jesus, they're just taking stories from the Old Testament and they're applying them to Jesus.
Oh, boy.
But they fail to understand that it's not written like myth, because there are myth and legends that are written at that time. They're written in a very different style. It's written in Roman narrative style. And it's definitely a narrative, and it's an actual account. But you can see, we understand these are just parallels, right? So we see these parallels. We see God's hand in these stories. They see parallels. They see man's hand
in God's stories.
Yeah. So they're not. They don't have that ability to discern properly. If you start as a skeptic, you're never. If you believe that God doesn't exist or that He can't work in our lives, that's how you're going to interpret everything through that filter. Of course. But yeah, so it says, so he set it before them and did eat and left thereof, according to the word of the Lord. Now, right, so when it says left, he says they shall eat and shall leave. What he means that there's going to be leftover, right? And so he said it before them, they did eat, and there was leftovers, according to the word of the Lord through Elisha. Okay. So I'm not sure where we would put this story, how we're going to take, where this comes in. So we could say this has in connection with the pot, right? So we have Parminder's message, which is going to poison the pot, and Elisha's going to come and unpoison it. and then we have this man from Baal Shalisha. So he's obviously a good guy. I mean, just because it says Baal means Lord, doesn't mean that he's worshiping Baal. But so the 3 times great Lord, whoever the place is named after, probably some lord of the place, no, the god Baal. But he has this 3 attached to it, the number 3. So it could have to do with the waymarks that we have in studying after the disappointment of July 18, 2020. Now, we got the first fruit symbol, and then we have the 20 loaves. Now, anything about there being 20 loaves of barley,
2001 to 2021 or 2010 to 2030?
Oh, so you're taking the 3 and putting it with the 20?
No, I'm just concentrating on the 20 right now.
Well, the 20, we could say it's 2020, but how do we understand 20 as a symbol? Anybody have any? I'm trying to think.
It's called a score in the Bible.
Yeah.
It's mentioned many times, but many different references.
Right. So we see the number 20 mentioned lots of times. I'm just trying to think if there's some significant story. Well, here it says on the internet, it can represent a period of waiting expectation for the completion of a cycle of testing. Now, we usually have 10 represents a test. It can represent the second angel's message itself. Jacob worked 20 years for Laban. So that's the one I was thinking of. I knew there was, I know there's the 20 years in the period of the judges, the ark, 20 years at Kiriath-Jearim before David moved it to Jerusalem. Right? 1 Samuel 7, verse 2. Yeah, it came to pass while the ark abode in Kiriath-Jearim that the time was long, it was 20 years, and all the house of Israel lamented after the Lord. So that's that 20 years.
Yeah, I don't think David was after that 20 years. I think that's just from when the Philistines took the ark, was brought back to Kiriath-Jearim, and then they're going to anoint Samuel or...
Okay. Yeah, it's not David. It would be Samuel. Yeah,
yes,
20 years
so he would begin his ministry.
This isn't the story of David. I know that's the problem with searching things on the internet. but it is before he brings it, right? So it's going to be 20 years at Kiriath-Jearim, just not right after that 20 years he doesn't take it to Jerusalem. And then we have, so Numbers 1, verse 3. For 20 years old and upward, all that are able to go forth to war in Israel, right? They're going to number them. So that's an age in which somebody could be numbered. Okay. We had 20 years, the 7 and the 13, with Solomon building the temple and then his house, right? So that would be significant. So what could we say then about the 20 loaves based on all these different 20s?
20 representing a time of preparation, definitely.
Yeah, there's a work that's being done in preparation. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, so the story of Elisha has lots of symbolism, and and we're going to go over these things again. Right? So we're not just casting it aside, but each of these stories, I think, builds on the next, right? Because Naaman being healed with leprosy, we should all be familiar with that. And lots of symbolism that I, probably have never paid attention to before when I read it, to my kids. Obviously, we recognize the 7 times. And then we're going to have the axe head. Again, another School of the Prophets story. And then... so it's here. Ben-Hadad's siege of Samaria. It's going to be something we can look at. Chronologically wise. Yeah, so that whole story with Syrians. And then Shudamites, again, is going to be involved. And then we get Jehu, anointed king of Israel. So yeah, so there's going to, we're going to try to go through this not too slowly at this point. But I'm sure it's going to take us time. Any final thoughts before we close with prayer? Okay, well, let's pray. Dear gracious Heavenly Father, we ask once again that you can be with us in our personal study. We're thankful for the things that we learn here each morning. But we know we need time with you alone, and we know that you are teaching us. So we just ask for your blessing for each person. Your angels can watch over them. Help those that are sick to heal. Help us, Lord, to follow and serve you. We pray this all in Jesus' name.